y'all, welcome and welcome back. If you are not new here, you will know that this is not my normal setup. Couple things to go over really quick. It's currently 62 degrees in the south on February 3rd. The world is on fire, and with that, it is too hot to film where I normally film upstairs because I left the heat on last night because it was cold last night, but today it's hot. So we're downstairs. The tripod might shake. All of my cats are down here with me. And we might be seeing this background more often than not. So I'm gonna decorate it up. Right now we just have some cute pillows. We have like a little tree behind me. But yeah, we will figure it out. I just know I would not be my best self if I was filming this burning up upstairs. But now that we got that out of the way. If you're new here, my name is Morgan, and here we do all things spooky, but this month specifically, we are doing nothing but reading stories that you guys have sent me for 28 days straight. And if we love it, I might do it longer. I don't know. So please send your stories in to me. You will find all of that information below, along with my other socials. So without further ado, let's get into these stories. And let's hope paranormal activity doesn't happen. Yesterday when you're seeing this, I literally just uploaded old TikToks because paranormal activity got so bad while I was filming this last one that I was like, I need a break. So let's hope it doesn't happen this time. Maybe a different scenery, like a more open scenery, and I'm filming this during the daytime will help. But let's get into these stories. Hi Morgan and Eric, hey bestie. I've been following your TikTok for around a year now, and usually I don't send my own stories to creators because I feel like they're not as scary as some. But recently I've binged your YouTube playlist of you reading these and realized that I hadn't heard any stories from Delaware. I've lived here all my life and I thought you might enjoy hearing these. Like you always say, unfortunately stuff can happen anywhere, and boy has it happened. I have a few different stories, some longer and scarier than others, so you can pick which ones you want to read. I'm also super interested to know if you think any of this stuff is connected or if I'm just sensitive. I will be reading all of these. I want to start by saying I've always been a vivid dreamer, and as much as I believe in the paranormal, I know some of them could have been my brain, but it doesn't feel that way to me. My parents always tell me stories about how when I was a kid, I would wake up screaming. And I would wake up screaming about how there were things in my room or my closet. I'd be terrified, screaming, crying, only for me to actually wake up and have no memory of it. I'm 20 years old now and still have no memory of any of that, and it stopped when I hit around 4 or 5. The first time I think I ever actually saw a ghost was at my grandmother's old house. She lived on a hill by a river across from some kind of old paper mill or factory of some kind, and there was an abandoned railroad bridge over the river by her house. I never actually saw or heard anything at either of these places, but I always felt really horrible energy if I was down by the river and got too close to either one. And one night I was sleeping over at the house with my cousins. The light was on and we were all asleep in the living room. Sometimes late in the night I woke up. I could move and I felt awake. I was not dreaming. I looked up and saw in the doorway to the dining room a very tall woman with long brown hair down to her knees. She was bony and her skin looked wrinkled. She had her head pointed down at the floor so I couldn't see her face. She was standing in a T-pose with her hands hanging down. She was wearing a green dress with pink flowers on it. I'd been gifted the same dress as a hand-me-down years earlier. It belonged to my great-grandmother, and she did not look like that. Her limbs were too long. She didn't move or speak, and at the time I didn't feel scared. I just crawled behind the rocking chair in the living room and went back to sleep. I told my mom what I'd seen, and she said that it was either just a dream or a manifestation of bad energy because she grew up in that house, and she tells me that she and her siblings had it pretty rough. I've never seen anything like that again, and thinking about it now still freaks me out. A similar thing happened to me at a friend's house one night. I was sleeping over in the basement, woke up and saw a shadow figure standing in the corner. I again didn't feel scared and went back to sleep. I know how the shadow people are often harmless, but it's still creepy. Years after all of these occurrences, I moved into the last house that I lived in. We moved in 2018, and at first things were calm. But in 2020, two notable things would happen. My grandmother and cousin moved in with us because of the pandemic, and we got a German Shepherd puppy. Her name's Karma, and she's my soul dog. Oh. I believe that when our home acquired two new people, it caused an energy shift. My grandmother's relationship with my mother was pretty strained. My cousin was recovering from a severe addiction issues at the time, so there was always a lot going on, and the four of us didn't always get along. We were the first people to live in that house, and no one's ever passed away, so I think everything I experienced was a manifestation of energy. But regardless, it starts out small. We had a small chandelier in our dining room, and one night I caught it swinging back and forth when I came downstairs. I lived there for 5 years, and it only did that once. My cousin and I tried recreating it by running and jumping around on the floors above the chandelier, but it did not move. Then, my dog started staring randomly into corners or very high on the walls. I assumed it was a bug until one day. I always used to leave my bathroom door open with the light off at my mom's request, and I hated it. I got a horrible energy from that bathroom, especially the shower. If I was showering, I always had to play music to feel safe, and I hated using the bathroom at night. One day, my dog, barely half a year old and not an aggressive bone in her body, walked past my open bathroom door and froze. She stared directly into the shower for a moment before the hair on the back of her neck stood up and she started barking at the shower. I went in and turned the light on, thinking that maybe she'd seen a bug or something and fallen, but there was nothing. She actually ended up running in after me and putting her little puppy self between me and the shower. She's grown up to be a very intuitive and smart dog, and she always has my back. That was the first time I ever saw her do that. I left the bathroom, and after that, the door stayed shut always. Later that night, she got scared by something in our living room. I didn't see or hear anything, but she was asleep on the couch one second, and the next she was standing at my feet, nervously looking around the room. She started whining and turning in circles like she does when she wants something. So I gave the command, "Show me." That usually results in her going to the door to be let out or pointing me out to her water bowl that needs to be filled. But that time she ran up the stairs to my bedroom. Then she ran back down to the landing and waited for me to follow. I went upstairs, locked my door, and left a crystal under the doorknob. The next day I found that crystal under my bed. 2020 would end pretty roughly, and my grandmother and cousin moved out after some traumatic events. As a result, in 2021, my mental health tanked. Without going into detail, it was the worst that I had ever been. It was around the time that things in the house started getting scarier. At first it was just things like footsteps at night, and I'd hear the steps go up a few steps, stop, and go back down and repeat. Sometimes they would sound like they were getting close to the top of the stairs, but I never actually heard anything get to that top floor. My mom and I slept on the top floors, so if it was my mom, I would have heard her leave her room. My dog would hear them too, and she never reacted, but she would always pick her head up and listen. But one night I fell asleep on the couch watching TV. My couch was in the living room directly in front of the stairs. Our stairs had a half a wall, meaning the railing went halfway up the stairs before meeting a wall. This wall made a little corner where it met the ceiling and second floor, and that little corner had always given me the worst vibes. If I was downstairs, that stairwell light had to be on. This particular night I woke up and had the urge to glance at the corner. I didn't know at the time that these urges are best being left alone, and I looked for a split second, only from my peripheral vision. It looked like a solid black head was peeking out from the corner. Oh my god, okay, I have stuff. Once I fully got my eyes on it, there was nothing. It started happening a lot. Anytime I would be downstairs alone, and even a couple of times when my friends was over. It never did anything else, but I always felt like it was watching me. On a particular bad night, when I couldn't ignore the energy in the air, I would say out loud, "Hey, not tonight." Just to tell it to leave me alone. I never felt threatened, but it creeped me out. That particular entity always felt a little heavy, angry, and watchful, but not in a nice way. After we moved out of the house, my mom, not a huge believer, said that she used to see it too. She never told me because she didn't want to scare me. I would also sometimes see things out of the corner of my eye, and it looked like small black animals, maybe cats, running past, but when I looked, nothing would be there. This next story is probably the scariest thing that has happened to me in that house. It was a day off from my junior year, and I had 4 friends over. I don't talk to any of them anymore, so I'm going to address them by initials. My best friend at the time, B, and my other close friends were C, R, and E. They came over and we got the subject of ghost going. C is some kind of medium, or at least sensitive, and asked if I wanted to try and see what the entities in my house were, particularly the shadowed man on the stairs. Against my better judgment, I said yes. It was started in my bathroom because that's where I got the worst vibes besides the stairs. We would do the Estes method, B being the one to wear the headphones. C and the rest of us asked questions, and at first we didn't get much, but then we got a few laughs and screams. After that, it started answering us. We heard it swear several times, say E's name even though she never asked any questions, and give us pretty consistent yes and no answers. At one point, it said karma, and I don't know if it was talking about my dog or not, but I ran out of the bathroom to check on her so fast. She was fine, perfectly happy with my mom in her room. I left her there for the rest of the session. Eventually, it kept talking about a girl in the shower. B had been sitting in the bathtub this whole time, so we figured it might mean that, but then it starts talking to us as if the girl who was supposedly lived in my shower. After this, it suddenly started telling us to go to the living room, using the words downstairs, go, out, things like that. At first, it sounded like a warning, so we listened. This was not a good idea. We started asking questions again, and this time we got nothing for a while. I was sitting on my couch, my back to the stairs, and I started to feel hot, specifically on the back of my neck and left shoulder. My head also started to hurt. I didn't mention it to anyone because I didn't want anyone to think I was lying, but then C, the medium, said, "Laura, there's a shadow man standing behind you." They told me that they had earlier seen a blonde girl walking up the stairs near where the man was standing. They said neither of the spirits gave off good energy, but the man seemed angry and oppressive. We needed to stop. We all 5 said goodbye, and that nothing was allowed to touch, harm, or follow us. The headache and hot feelings started to go away. After this, all 4 of them went home, and I was left by myself for the aftermath. I went straight downstairs, got my dog, and went to bed. I heard the footsteps up and down my stairs again that night, but that was the end of it. The next morning, I found bees keyed to my house on my front porch. They ended up not being a great friend, so honestly, that might have dropped it on purpose. It's worth noting that I told them that I found it and they never came to get it, so this really might not have been a ghost. I also have to wonder if something in my house was trying to tell me something about that friendship. Bee often said they didn't really believe in ghosts, but sometimes they often told me that their basement was haunted. There's a whole story behind this that isn't mine to tell. They often felt the presence of a young boy. Their basement has a finished side and an unfinished side, with a door that connects the two. The door remains open for ventilation purposes, I think. One night I was over there with the same friend from the ghost hunt, and I saw at the corner of my eye a flash of blue and white that made the outline of a person. It was around the height of a child and only lasted a second, but when I told B and C, we all immediately went upstairs. I only encountered that particular spirit once, but from what B told me, he had always seemed lonely, not scary or angry. Like I said, I don't talk to those friends anymore, and things ended pretty horribly with B in particular. They were my best friend, and that sucked, but I've realized that they weren't the best influence in my life, and I have to wonder if there's a reason a couple of my paranormal experiences are connected to them. I moved out of my old house at the end of 2023, and at the new place I've barely experienced anything. Occasionally a light will flicker, or I'll see a shadow for a split second, but nothing has ever felt off. I started dating my girlfriend this past February, and she's from another state. So one day I took her to my old hometown to show her around. We were sitting in a graveyard talking about a date. This particular graveyard was pretty close to where B lived, and we hung out there once or twice. My girlfriend ended up seeing an orb. She said it was green and floated about the height of a person's head. It apparently floated up to the car window before disappearing. She didn't tell me until we left because she didn't want to scare me, but after that I really wondered if it was my house or me that was haunted. My mom said I'm sensitive to energy, so it could be the things passing through that are just drawn to me. I live in an area with a lot of woods now, and I hear things in them sometimes, but I try my best not to pay any attention. I briefly mentioned it to my coworker recently, and she said, yeah, that happens around here sometimes. Anyway, that's all. Sorry this was so long. If there's any advice you have to give me about any of this, I'd be so appreciative, but things have calmed down a lot now. I actually took a voice memo during one of the SD sessions with my old friend, but I must have deleted it after we stopped talking because I can't find it, which sucks. I wanted to attach the part where it said my dog's name. I love your content. Thanks for giving us a place to share these stories and giving us advice. I do have thoughts. So I have I'm talking about this right in front of my stairs, which is not fun for me. But I have a similar thing that happens in my house. And the first time I saw that entity was the day that I moved in. I remember I was carrying things into my front door, sitting them about where I'm sitting right now, looking up to my stairs and seeing the outline of a dark head peep around the wall of my stairs. I have come to learn that is my house spirit. I don't really get, like, it scared me, so I guess negative vibes in that sense, but I don't really get negative vibes from it, and I'm thinking that's maybe what you were dealing with. And here's the thing when it comes to house spirits, they just want to protect the house, and if you take care of your house and are respectful of it, they will take care of you. So that very well could have been the house spirit, especially with them dropping their key, trying to warn you that that was not a good friend and trying to look out for you. But I do not think that was the only thing in that house for sure. And like you said, you saw other entities. I don't think those entities were good, but house spirits are typically very benign. Like I said, they just want you to take care of the space. All right, next story. When I was around 16, we moved in with my grandfather. My grandmother had passed away in this house, but I don't think she was the only one haunting this house. Once my cousins had looked in the basement and seen an arm come around the corner of the steps and wave them back away. Another time, my brother had been awake playing video games late at night and started to feel uncomfortable. He said he heard a growl beside of him, sending him running upstairs. He said he ran because he felt something chasing after him and hearing the growl. I also heard it once myself. Another time my brother heard something doing laundry and he thought it was my mom, so he went to go tell her something. When he rounded that corner, there was no one. Lots of times we all heard something calling our names. Now that my mom has bought her own house, we noticed her angel knickknacks turning in different directions or just plain falling off the shelves. Do you think some of it is my grandma or something more nefarious? Okay. So I don't think any of that is a deceased relative. It doesn't feel like that for me. It feels like something definitely trying to scare you, especially with turning religious items backwards. So I would recommend doing a cleansing and setting up protection, because that does not need to be in your space. If it cannot coexist peacefully, it doesn't need to be in your space. All right, next story. I wanted to tell you a story about when I was 12 years old. Back then I was living in another house with my family and my room was in the attic. I had a walk-in closet in my room and I've always closed it at night because I would see figures in there. So once I woke up an hour before sunrise, and I woke up because I felt something under my bed. This thing was breathing, like my bed was going up and down, and I heard the sound. I was absolutely terrified. I didn't move no matter how uncomfortable it got. Well, finally the sun rose, and I turned on a light and saw a shadow underneath my bed that looked like a person breathing. When I told my family about it, my father said that an old man died in that house. We moved to a new place, and since then, I'm not scared of the dark anymore. Alright, next story. These are 3 of my stories, and I have plenty more where that came from. Here's the first one. 5 months after moving into our new house, I experienced a night that would remain etched in my memory. It was an ordinary evening. Everyone had fallen asleep while I, at the age of 11, was engrossed in my Nintendo 3DS playing for hours. After losing track of time, I decided to call it a night around midnight, feeling the weight of fatigue. My dog Jovi and I settled in for sleep. When I awoke, an eerie sensation enveloped me. It felt as if I were floating, disconnected from my surroundings. At 11 years old, confused and a panic set in as I struggled to comprehend my situation. Suddenly, I sensed the cold touch of hangers and clothes. Shockingly, I realized I was in my closet. I never experienced sleepwalking before, so I knew that this was something different. The texture of the hanger sent my anxiety spiraling, and I fumbled for the doorknob, pushing it against with all of my strength, and it felt as an unseen force was holding it shut. After what felt like an eternity of struggling, I finally managed to open that door. As I glanced around my room, dread washed over me. My desk chair was wedged beneath the closet door. Jovi was curled in the corner of my bed, growling and trembling in a darkened corner of my room. An unsettling feeling crept over me, as if something lurked in that shadowy space. I checked my phone. It was 3:33 in the morning, and fear gripped my stomach. My family was fast asleep, and I had no choice but to pull the covers over myself and hold Jovi until morning. The next story. By the time I turned 13, my fascination with the supernatural deepened. I immersed myself in reading about walkers, paranormal occurrences, and creepypasta stories. I'd always been attuned to my spiritual side, sensing and seeing things beyond the ordinary since I was 3. However, as a teenager, my negative energy seemed to amplify the strange happenings around me. One evening, my stepdad dropped me off at a friend's house. He and my mom decided to watch a movie. In the midst of their viewing, they heard my voice calling out "Mom" thrice from my room. I said twice. I don't know why I said thrice. My stepdad, initially skeptical, feared an intruder and searched the house armed with protection, but found nothing. This entity had been mimicking my voice for years, only ever saying "Mom," which unsettled my mother. Fortunately, we haven't heard it in about a year now, and I'm now 21. The next story. Living in Virginia, I often visited Fort Monroe, an old military base rich in history. One day, my friend Alex and I were exploring the pet cemetery when we heard what sounded like a collar juggling behind us. Initially, we dismissed it, thinking it might be a lingering dog. However, we descended the stairs, and a light patter of paws transformed into heavy footsteps. We chose to ignore this, aware of the fort's vibrant energy. While wandering and photographing the historic houses, I decided to climb onto a cannon for a picture. Well, just as Alex was about to snap that shot, an unseen force suddenly shoved me, sending me crashing to the ground, breathless. Instinctively, I knew it was time to leave, and despite my struggle to breathe, we sprinted away. I thought that as long as we distanced ourselves from that area, we would be safe, and I was gravely mistaken. We soon decided to take some witchy photos with candles and symbols. While Alex was capturing my image, we heard footsteps again, but brushed it off as merely the energy of soldiers. Yet a couple of minutes later, a strange feeling washed over us, prompting us to hasten our photo session. Just as we prepared to leave with our candles, we heard the most terrifying growl I have ever encountered. In a panic, we abandoned the candles, focusing solely on escaping whatever was chasing us. Since that night, I have not returned to Fort Monroe after dark. I don't blame you. I don't blame you. Okay. So it sounds like you might have a mimic situation, but the thing at Fort Monroe, I think that might be something that protects the cemetery. It could also be like a walker or a Wendy boy. But it seems like something that's protecting the cemetery. It could be something that's protecting the cemetery and doesn't want you, like, you know, doing all the stuff, like sitting on the cannon. Maybe it found that disrespectful or things like that. It could also just be something with malicious intent. Like, the possibilities are endless. But if you wanted to, like, explore and see, you could go back and try just, like, walking through, maybe leaving a coin as an offering as you walk through and see if nothing happens. And if nothing happens, then it was a guardian of the cemetery. But you're taking a risk because if something else happens, it's something a lot worse and you're putting yourself, like, not in a great position. So it's up to you. But one or two. It could be either or, really. All right, let's read another story. When I was younger, me and my mom lived in this basement kind of apartment. My grandma moved out so we could live there. Anyways, I come home one night from hockey with my mom and I went inside to play with my Barbies. I didn't think of it at first, but I could hear the fan going on in the bedroom even though we had turned it off before we left. I sat in the living room and started hearing talking from that bedroom. I got scared and ran back to my mom's car where she was sitting. Here's another story from now. I was home alone at around 11 this time. I was on the phone with my friend Adeline, fake name, and I was coming out of my bathroom where I look across the house and see a dark shadow looking at me from the laundry room and quickly went back in there once it noticed me looking. I told my aunt and mom when they came home, and my mom said to stop talking about it because that's on her side of the house. That night, my mom was sleeping with her dog and she woke up to him low growling at the closet door. More creepy stuff has happened. If you'd like to hear about it, I can definitely tell you. Please. Woo! Drop my iPad. All right, let's read one more story. I want to share a weird story that happened to me and my partner, we'll call him S, on election night. To preface, we live around 30 minutes from Chattanooga, more or less in the middle of the woods. We have neighbors, but not that close. I've experienced a number of things in this house over the years that I've been living here, including something pretending to be one of our cats outside and fake sounding animal noises by the doors when the cats are sleeping. Me and my partner both smoke, and we were outside on election night, just taking a break from being near the TV and trying to chill, sitting on the porch with cigarettes. I can't remember exactly what we were talking about at the time, but I remember we had a candle burning on the porch railing for light. Since the outside light was bright and we just weren't feeling it at that moment, everything seemed relatively peaceful besides, well, current events. We're in a slight pause in conversation, and we both hear what I can only describe as the most unholy thing that I have ever heard. I'm Texan by origin, so sirens don't really scare me. They're part of the background noise when stuff picks up a bit. If you live in Tornado Alley, you understand. However, this was something that snatched my breath away, and it made me feel what I think was my first ever true primal fight or flight response, and I've been through a lot. This was not a normal sound, and it put me all the way in the back of my own brain. Without even thinking, hearing this from what sounds like just around the corner, we can't see the source, there are no street lights on the time either. I look to S and tell him that we need to get inside now, in a low whisper because it's all I can get out. And see, I do have weird moments, hallucinations, spooky stuff happens to me, but the thing that scared me about this moment is that despite being the kind of person to debunk something before believing it has supernatural origins, S's reaction was one of immediate panic too, which I think scared me more in those moments. We blow out the candle and hustle ourselves inside the house as the siren continues for roughly 10 to 15 seconds. It sounds like it reaches the crossroads near our house and then stops. Now by this point, I'm wondering if it's not some D-bag in a land yacht blasting weird purge-like siren sounds from his truck since it's election night. I expected some weird crap to happen in our vicinity for sure. So we both lock our doors and turn on all the lights in the house and sit in the living room listening and occasionally peek around the curtain for probably an hour or two. Nothing really happened after that. But the energy was still off the whole night, like something not from this world was lingering. It was one of the most tense nights that I've had in a while. When we were discussing after, we both said that we both thought it was unreal until the other one reacted, and that he looked at me with surprise when I said something. The fact that we both heard it and couldn't brush it off was unnerving as heck. I'm a superstitious person in a weird way. I've tried befriending what I thought was a flesh pedestrian of some flavor. Long story for another time. So I keep my ears out at all times. We haven't heard anything like that since, and I'm so afraid to ever see the source of it really. It gives me a feeling that I've only ever experienced from the most malicious entities, but bigger, way bigger. I don't exactly know how to move past it because I keep thinking, what if we hear it again? In any case, it was frightening, if even a brief event, and I think it'll stick with me for a long time. I have lots of ghost stories behind me. Thank you so much for your consideration. Of course I'm interested. That definitely sounds like it was not of this earth. But here's the thing, when it comes to big events like election nights and things like that, where there's a lot of negative energy from whatever side, it can call a lot of things to you because your vibrations are naturally going to be lower because you're stressed out and scared, and that could call things to you. So, I mean, you reacted in a good way. You got inside. You didn't really react that much to it. So if you hear it again, just try your best to ignore it, and hopefully it'll leave you alone. I'm thinking maybe it was just something attracted to the low vibrations. Anyways, that is all for today. Thank you so much to everyone that sent me a story to read. Please send in your stories, and I will see you tomorrow to read more stories.